What's up, everybody? I'm David.
And I'm Manny, and today we're gonna talk about the best thing about keeping these geckos.
Breeding them.
One of the coolest things, at least for us, about owning reptiles is having the opportunity to breed them. Literally everyone we've ever met who's ever owned a reptile eventually dips their toe in breeding. Now, with each different species, different requirements need to be met to be able to breed them successfully. Now in this video, we're only going to talk about Crested Gecko and Gargoyle Gecko breeding. Now for females, we like to wait until they're 40 to 50 grams, and males can be generally smaller than the females, and we don't like to go below 35 grams, minimum 35 grams. Now the males develop a bulge at the base of the tail, and the females don't develop the bulge at all. So that's how you can tell the male from female. It's like some reptiles, you can tell the males have generally larger heads, but with Crested Geckos and Gargoyle Geckos, that does not work. Now, what kind of cage setup would I need? You would need for a pair an 18 by 18 by 18, and for like a 1.4 an 18 by 18 by 24.
So when setting up your enclosure, you want to make sure you have a functional use of the space. In other words, you don't want to have 6 inches on top that basically has nothing. You want to make sure there's a lot of fake plants or cork bark, egg crates, whatever, that the animals could crawl or hide, or that creates a lot of visual barriers for these geckos. So if they are stressing each other out, they could kind of, get away from each other, stay out of the line of sight, and, not be as stressed. The breeding process in captivity is a lot different than it would be in the wild. In the wild, 2 geckos would meet, they would do their business, and each would go in their separate ways, right? Not in captivity. For breeding purposes, to maximize the amount of eggs and productivity, we keep them together, obviously. So we want to make sure we have enough visual barriers and different spaces where they can hide and get away from each other.
Another thing you can do is also sometimes even give them different feeding bowls. Sometimes you get some geckos that are more territorial than others, and in that case you could use 2 or 3 different feeding bowls to maximize your space.
Yeah, exactly. If you find that your geckos are having a little bit of issue getting along, which breeding lizards generally is very rough, and for somebody that's not used to it, it could kind of freak them out. But if they're not getting along more than usual, you could start adding more food bowls, and maybe that could help the problem. Alright guys, so this is an example of how we keep our breeding groups here. Come over here, Manny. Manuel Duran. Check them out on Facebook. Anyways, right. So what we have here is some PVC pipes. The geckos will use this to climb and whatnot. I have some fake plants. I have these styrofoam type tubes. More fake plants. I like to use the egg cartons a lot. 1, because they make good poop collectors. And 2, because the geckos like to hide under it, and they like to climb around it. If you guys want to see right here, this is one of our extreme Harlequin groups. They look pretty nice right now, so I figured I'd show you them if they stop moving. Believe it or not, this little guy is getting it in with this big one. But anyways, so what we do here, we have a lay box.
They just can't get enough of you.
Yeah, I know. So this is a lay box I keep for them. The females, once they're ready to lay, they will come in here. They will basically dig up anywhere here. And I don't think I'll find eggs. I just paired these guys up not too long ago, so there's no eggs. But, eggs, but they're infertiles.
How can you tell, David?
Because I have a lot of experience. No, the fertile eggs will be a little bit fatter. They'll be white, and the infertile eggs are usually a little bit yellowish. And they're crappy looking like this. I'll show you guys how you guys could tell at home later on though.
Now we have here one of our fan favorite geckos. This is the infamous, the famous, the notorious Deadpool. And you can see why he's such a fan favorite. And we're specializing in the red stripe. We're trying to make it brighter, thicker, bolder. Now, one of the cool things about the Gargoyle red stripes is Gargoyles and Crested Geckos fire up and down, but with the red stripes on the Gargoyle Geckos, they stay the same intensity, whether they're fired up or they're fired down, which is a nice change because for some reason, at least with me, the red Crested Geckos fire up the least out of any other Crested Geckos that we have. Now, this is one of the groups, and he's paired up with a nice female right here. Oof, look at that big girl. Baby's coming soon. Now you can tell the males the same exact way as you can tell the males apart from the Crested Geckos. Oh, come back here. As the males develop, ooh, nice. As the males develop a bulge, as you can see. Thank you for that surprise, man.
He just pooped on Manny.
Pooped, peed. I got a little sperm on me too.
So generally, the breeding season for Crested or Gargoyle Geckos really depends on where you live. For us here in Florida, we could kind of pair the geckos all year round basically because our house temperature is at a constant, you know, let's say 75 degrees. So, but those of you that live up north and that, you know, experience all the 4 seasons, you could take advantage of that to increase the productivity of your breeding animals. Now, what you would do basically is you would pair the geckos, whether it's Crested or Gargoyle, you would want to pair them kind of like towards the end of the cooling season, maybe like the last 3 or 2 weeks of winter. That way the animals are not going to be as active, they're not going to be as aggressive when it comes to breeding, and they just ease in the breeding season into the spring and the summer months. That's going to be a lot better on your females. They're not going to get as beat up, and even the males too, they could get beat up sometimes as well. Now, if you don't, like I said earlier, we live in Florida, that's fine. If you have a constant house temperature and it doesn't really fluctuate too much, then you're gonna have to, you could simulate that breeding season if you're able to do that, or just breed them all year round basically. But you want to make sure you give the females like 3 or 4 months of rest when they're laying nothing or infertile eggs, so that they can recuperate from the breeding process. Crested geckos in general will lay anywhere from 6 to 10 clutches of 2 eggs every month or so. Gargoyle geckos will lay, you know, a little bit less, maybe 4 to 6 or 8 clutches of 2 eggs. And it could vary, obviously.
Yeah, Crested geckos live around average 15 years, and females usually produce for around 10 years. Now, you can maximize this by feeding them high quality food and calcium dusted crickets, especially while they're breeding. A lot of times their body needs the extra protein, the extra fat, and the extra calcium, because believe it or not, breeding takes a big toll on these guys, and they need the extra fat and protein and calcium to keep producing good quality eggs, and for longer periods of time.
From my experience, the best soil or substrate to use with a lay box is either the eco earth, the peat moss, or the coconut fiber. These 3 substrates hold the humidity in very, very well. If you have a substrate that dries out quick and it dries out before you reach the eggs run the risk of drying out, they dent in, and unfortunately you might lose them. So make sure that if you get a substrate, when you mix it in with the water, it's not wet to the point that it's going to be dripping water, but it should be moist where it holds the moisture in for a couple weeks. As you can see with the lay box, I only have 1 hole for the female to crawl in, and that's basically it. She is pretty much doing what a female will do, you know, couple days or even a week before they actually bury the eggs. They'll kind of go in there, feel it out, they'll bury their head in the substrate, and they'll check it how humid it is or whatever. Once they're ready, they'll deposit the eggs, bury it, and be on their way out. Pretty cool. So this is what a fertile egg looks like. Now, when they first lay the eggs, you're gonna see a red Cheerio once you rotate the egg under the flashlight. But since this one's a little bit later in the development stage, it's basically all red. Now that tells me that there's something living in there. Now I'm just gonna let it, put it down and let it incubate. But as you can see, there's a clear difference. This egg is pretty much yellow when I put the flashlight underneath it. And if this was a fertile egg, basically I would want to just keep rotating it until I would find a little red circle or a Cheerio. That's how I know an egg is fertile. But these eggs are, the infertile eggs usually are a little bit smaller, not as hard, and they're basically yellow.
Now, if I can't find the red ring or red Cheerio, should I still incubate it?
Well, you want to make sure, if you can't see the red Cheerio, you want to keep turning the egg. And if it's for sure that there's no red Cheerio, then it's not fertile. But if you're not sure of what you're doing, then you could still incubate it. It doesn't do it any harm. Okay, so once you guys collect the eggs, you want to keep, there's various mediums you could use for incubation. Some of the best ones are perlite, vermiculite, or personally my favorite is super hatch. Now, with the perlite or the vermiculite, you want to use a ratio of 0.8 to 1 water to medium by weight. I'll repeat that. That's 0.8 water to 1 medium by weight of perlite or vermiculite. For the super hatch, what you could do is you could soak the super hatch in water for like about 5 minutes, and then you drain all the water out, and the super hatch will retain some of that the moisture. And the super hatch is cool because when it starts to dry out, it changes color. So it's very easy to see, you know, if the substrate is moist or not.
Generally, you want to incubate the eggs anywhere from 70 to 80 degrees. The cooler temperatures, they're gonna incubate longer than the warmer temperatures. For example, if you incubate like at 78 degrees, the eggs can hatch in 2 months. And if you incubate like at 73, the eggs can hatch in 3 months. The babies come out a lot bigger and a lot stronger though, the longer they incubate.
Alright guys, so this is how I incubate my eggs. I basically keep them in a, container about, maybe a little bit bigger than a shoebox. I put about 1 inch of substrate and I bury the eggs halfway in. A lot of people like to write on the eggs, the female or the day it was laid. I rather just put a little tag on top, and when it hatches, I just see, obviously the hatched egg, and I know exactly where it came from. Something that to keep in mind that's very important is that you don't want to keep adding water to the substrate once you already put the eggs in there. If you add too much water, it could increase, it could drown basically the embryo or the baby inside. You want to make sure that you pretty much leave the eggs just as it is. You don't want to mess with it too much, especially when it's already in the later stages of development. Just leave it there, wait your turn, and you'll have babies.
Now, do you put the embryo facing up or whatever, however you dig it up? So
yeah, I basically what we do is we grab the egg, we flashlight the egg with the red Cheerio facing top, and we place it like that. That's the embryo. There's a little air bubble on top that if you rotate the egg, it could drown. Now, some people say that that the gecko eggs embryo just kind of goes to the top. I'm not sure, so I've always just done it this way.
If it works, why change it?
Exactly.
One of the most important things to do when breeding any reptile and geckos is to keep records. keep records of the pairings, keep records of the offspring, keep records of their great 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 grandparents. You want to have all of that lineage down, so you know when something weird pops up, you know where it came from.
Exactly. Another good reason to keep track of, you know, the breeding and the offspring and all of that is because simply you want to know when your females are being the most productive. You want to know, for instance, if there's a couple amount of years, if your females already hit, you know, 10 or 12 breeding seasons, you might want to replace her for a younger female. You also want to know because if something happens to hatch out that's extraordinary out of nowhere, you know, you want to know exactly where that came from so you can reproduce it again. You know, there's been instances of breeders who produce some crazy looking geckos, but because they're mass producing, you know, Cresteds or Gargoyles, they have no clue who are the parents or exactly where the gecko came from. So it's definitely smart to keep track of this so you know later on, you know exactly who you could pair up with if you want to get some results, or you know, it varies a lot. Okay guys, so one of the ways that I keep track of records over here at TikisGeckos is that, as you can see, I put, you know, some tape here and I basically write down the breeders that are in the box. Here there's Omega, the male, and Mila. Under here I put the date that she laid her first clutch, and I put the quality of the eggs or egg. So that's easy to say. It's easy to keep track of, you know, how the female is laying, how many clutches she's laid so far. And at the end of the season, I'll grab this and I'll put it in a folder that belongs to Mila.
One of the most commonly asked questions when it pertains to breeding is, will this gecko make a good pair with this gecko?
Right. So my answer to that is, if you like two geckos, how they look, go ahead, breed them. But one thing is you liking them, and one thing is breeding to sell or breeding to, you know, try to achieve the highest quality color or pattern. So with that being said, crested geckos are really polygenic. There's a couple co-dominants or traits that work as co-dominants or dominant, but for the most part they're polygenic. What that means is you want to breed, basically, if I have a patternless red gecko and another patternless red gecko and I pair those two up, they're going to produce really red geckos. Versus if I put a patternless red gecko with like a yellow. Red with red will usually produce, you know, high quality reds. Yellow with yellow will usually produce high quality yellows. Now, same thing for some other patterns. If I have like a harlequin type and I put that with a patternless, I might produce flames. If I put a harlequin with another harlequin and they're good quality, I might even produce extreme harlequins, or, you know, harlequins that are just as good as the parents. So it varies with what you want to make, it varies with what you're trying to do with your breeding, but it's all fun, so it really depends on you guys. So that was everything you guys needed to learn about breeding crested and gargoyle geckos. So until next time, stay tuned.
And make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, Periscope. If there's an app for it, we have it, and make sure you follow us.
For sure. Guys, I can't thank you guys enough for all the support. Keep subscribing, keep watching the videos, and any suggestions, feel free to, you know, hit them down below in the comments. And you guys already know, last Saturday of every month, new TikisGeckos.